Great, then I'll be quiet and over to you, Vivian.
Thank you. I think we can wait for 1 or 2 more minutes, or are the play one? I'm Vivian. I'm your host and moderator for this third webinar of the Real Play City Challenge. It is the third of a series of a webinar brought to you by Real Play Coalition and Placemaking X. And in this webinar, we will be focusing on enabling play in vulnerable contexts. So you will be hearing from people that have worked on the field, but also from one of our placemaking Real Play City Challenge winners about their experience with working in such context. Next one, please. So what is Real Play City Challenge? Real Play City Challenge aims to reclaim places to play in cities for children. Next one. By inspiring action, sharing international knowledge, and enhancing our impact. And how do we do that? Next one, please. We have launched an open call for cities and placemakers who have already shared their tried and tested initiatives in child-friendly, safe, and playful urban practice. We also do this with a series of webinars like this one that you have just joined to learn from one another and strengthen our practice. And also by scaling up the initiatives, our winning placemakers will use their mind of their award to develop and improve their initiative to deliver in different contexts. So we have these three different modes of our program. Next one, please. Our winners of the open call have been announced, and we're blown away by the quality and diversity of initiatives from around the world. Our jury selected 10 winners from 6 different continents. You can find out more about them on our website, Real Play City Challenge, as you see there on the link, / winners. Next one, please. This is the third of 4 webinars happening now in November, which is the Global Month of Play, which you can also join. So today we have this one about working in vulnerable groups, vulnerable context, excuse me. And the next one will be on the 3rd of November. Next one, please. So a little bit about the agenda of the day. I have just put a little bit of introduction and welcoming. Then we will go into putting a framework around our webinar. For this, we will have Sara Candirazzi helping us with this. Then we will have a presentation from one of the women placemakers, Noodlecart. And then we will move to the interactive session about that we call Playful Placemaking Clinic, where we will be able to share and exchange. And then a little bit of a summing up and promise for the next one. Next slide, please. So who is among us today? Of course, between all of you, we also have Marcus Fairman from Noodlecart, our placemaking winner, Sara Candirazzi from Arup, Jonathan Robinson from Civic, and Selva Gurdogan from Superpool. And we can start a little bit with the framing presentation by Sara. So Sara is an associate director in the International Development Group and member of the leadership team of Arup. Sara was a member of our nomination jury. We invited her today to frame the session and to tell us what are the important considerations for enabling play in vulnerable contexts using her experience of applying the urban play framework in South Africa. So Sara will share with us for the next 5 minutes about her experience. Thank you very much, Sara, for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Vivian. Okay, hi everyone. I'm gonna share my screen so that it's gonna be easier for you to. Okay, can you see it? Okay, so as Vivian said, I'm Sara. I'm an urban planner. I work for Arup. I'm normally based in London, but now I'm in Lima for this week and next week for work. So today I'm very happy to share with you one project I'm very close with that we implemented last year in Cape Town, in Kalicha, in collaboration with the Real Play Coalition of the Life Foundation. Actually, Arup is a member of the Real Play Coalition, and this was the first project the first play activation that we implemented with the Real Play Coalition. To do the work in Cape Town, in Kalicha, we used the urban play framework that Arup developed. I think I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that, but the urban play framework is a tool that we developed to better understand the complexity of play in cities and to see how we can support designer, decision makers, developers to design and implement play-based interventions in different type of contexts. So we use the urban play framework in two different contexts. One was London and one was Galicia. And the reason for doing that was to try to understand what are the difference of the play experience and how children experience the urban space in completely different contexts. So so in Galicia, that is a township in Cape Town. So it's an informal settlement in Cape Town where there are around 200,000 people living. So we apply the framework using a participatory approach. Basically, we started with the desk-based research to understand socioeconomic spatial conditions. Then we undertook transit walks, focus groups, interviews with different type of people, even their stakeholders in Galicia. And then we organized 2 assessment workshops with children from 0 to 5 and their caregivers, and children from 6 to 12, to have their perception about the space, how they live it, what are the key challenges they're facing. And also we ran a photo contest for children in the primary school, and we asked them using disposable camera to take pictures of their favorite place or their favorite games that they were normally doing in their life. So what we identify as a key challenges in this informal settlement, of course, as in many vulnerable contexts, safety is a huge issue. Safety from people, safety from the space, because the environment presents different type of hazards, from drug users and violence, from weather extremes conditions, flooding, the presence of, for instance, a river where children normally go and play, where it's not only dirty, but also is a danger because don't know how to swim in many cases. So unfortunately, people also have been dying there. And in relation to play, play is not considered something serious, of course, but it's not only in Cape Town. That we found also in London. Play is something that children does that parents don't necessarily support or facilitate. They don't play together, don't have time for playing with their children. And it's something that should happen only at school in designated area. But the reality is that children love to play, and so they play all over the places. They play also here on the right side. On the bottom, you can see the sanitation facilities there, and they play over there. So of course, the conditions are not definitely ideal. So what we try to do is engaging also children in co-creation activities. So as we did it in collaboration with the Library Foundation, we design and organize a workshop and we asked children to, the first hand, to build what are the key challenge, let's say, in the face in their area. For instance, on the left, you can see a small child who built a small park. She's in the middle, and there are 2 policemen around her. So that was quite clear that safety is definitely a huge issue there. And then we asked them to build the ideal space. So, and then we also asked them to draw the ideal play space in the area. So basically combining the knowledge that we got from our assessment, the engagement with children, with the caregivers, and looking at the area, we managed to identify a possible solution to see how we could actually activate play in that area. We identify that option because there were different play courtyards that are quite unique in informal settlement. So we identified different areas that were kind of connected. And so we saw that as an opportunity actually to create play spaces, a network of play spaces where children can actually play, can move around, and can feel safe. So what we did, we designed 3 play areas, and each play area was associated to a cognitive skill that you actually can develop through play. And so the way, for instance, play space number 1, the way we design it, the games that we include in the space are aimed to develop the social skills of children. For play space 2 was about emotional skills. For the third one, about cognitive skill. And we did that in collaboration with the community. We identified play agents that we also train in terms of how to play with children and how to also use play as a way for stimulating certain skills. So, and so as a key consideration from this experience is, first of all, it's very important to understand before designing. And when you understand, especially when you work in this context, it's important to have an holistic understanding. So starting from understanding the context, So all the challenges, the opportunity that exists in the context, and also the needs of the beneficiary, the risk, the constraint, the needs they have, the opportunities also to understand who the caregivers are, because the caregivers can be their siblings who are like 7 years old or 10 years old, and they spend all time alone in the house, for instance. And it's very important to try to embed play in all aspects of design. So try to find a way for designing playful hand washing units or wash facilities, and also include play in the process. So while engaging with children and the community, try to do it in an engaging and playful way. Then it's very important to understand what are the local skills, what are the local resources, and so value those, and also adjust to the local partners. So try really to do the extra mile to see what is not really seen and to value what is normally unvalued. So even if in a situation like that seems desperate, there are always a way to find a solution to activate play. And I also try to identify multiple benefits from your intervention. So as I said, like in a hand washing space where the caregivers normally meet, that can become a playful space for children or the market. So really try to embed play again in every aspect of the built environment. And also it's very important to have a meaningful and ongoing engagement with the community, or most importantly also with children. And then another point I think is quite important is while you provide play, safe play for children, is important also to create the awareness among the caregivers that play is important and that they have their role to facilitate play in their life. So that's, yeah, thanks a lot. I'm here for any questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. It was very helpful to, get the gist out of what you're experiencing in South in this context. And I think it will be very meaningful information and insights to integrate them afterwards in the discussion and the way the placemakers will develop their proposals. So thank you very much for that. And maybe we can move now to the winners. So in each of the webinars, we'll hear from a winner of the Real Play City Challenge. In our third session today, we have Marcus Fairman, who is the founder and co-designer of Playground Ideas, and the winning placemaking initiative is called Noodlecart, and it is implemented in Beirut. This wonderful initiative, and it is an innovative placemaking concept which demonstrates how to mobilize and enable play in any context. So, Marcus, for the next 8 minutes, we would love to hear from you and your experience in working in such a context. Thank you very much for being here.
Hi, everyone. I'll just get my screen up. Okay, can everyone see that okay? All right, can everyone see that okay? Can I get a response? We're on the right track here? Yeah?
Yes, great.
Yeah.
Great. All right.
Yes.
So my name is Marcus Veerman. I run an organization called Playground Ideas, and today I'm talking about that and our new startup, Noodlecart. Sorry, I just got to change. Oh yeah, okay, good. Playground Ideas has been running for about 12 years. We've supported we estimate 4,300 communities in about 143 countries to build, to support impact about 2 million children around the world to get access to stimulating play spaces, which are built by local people using local materials and resources. It's a fully open source and free model. Our second and current startup that we're really focused on is Noodlecart. Noodlecart was inspired by the experience of trying to scale customized play spaces everywhere and some of the challenges we faced in that. And that's what I want to talk about today. We wanted to be able to create something that anywhere from our local school in Australia to some of the harshest, remote, and often conflict-filled environments that we could quickly, easily, and cost-effectively scale up a solution that worked for children and their educators. So this is the meat of the workshop here, that talking about these ideas of risk, taking opportunities, and managing safety. And there was a few ways that I was going to take some of those words of risk and taking opportunities in terms of our business plan and our social enterprise and things like that. But I really want to focus today on the children. So first of all, I want to talk about a few ways that we can take that word risk. So firstly, the risk of doing nothing for young people in vulnerable contexts is disastrous. UNICEF reports that about 2/3 of children right now are failing their local curriculum after 4 years of school. Millions and millions and millions of children are not doing well in school, and those local curriculums often don't focus on 21st century skills and other things. The UN also reports that about 250 million children will not reach what they call their full developmental potential, which is a sort of a measure of their holistic learning and development. So this is a huge problem that, if we don't do something about, is going to have huge and ongoing consequences for all of us, because we want children to reach that full developmental potential. Another way of taking the word risk is that children in vulnerable communities are often at risk of their world. And I just appreciate Sarah's comments. She really covered this quite well, so I'll skip over it. That children's worlds are risky. Sanitation and water and rivers and not being able to swim, playing in empty lots full of broken glass, not having playgrounds, all those playgrounds being rusty and damaged is a significant problem. And then I wanted to use the word risk in a positive light. So risk is an essential part of discovering the boundaries of life and is an unavoidable element of growth and development. You need to take risks. You can't know what you're capable of without taking risks and trying things outside of your current competence. And it's only outside of your competence that you learn and grow in actual experience and wisdom. You can know something on paper, but it takes a risk to really understand that. And then in terms of the opportunity presented to us to create more playful cities for children is immense. One study in Jamaica for vulnerable communities in Kingston showed that the children who got play early in life had a 43% increase in their salaries later in their adult life. So that represents an enormous benefit for children over their lifetimes if we can create more play for them. And finally, safety has been an ongoing issue for our communities. It takes attention to detail, it takes high quality materials, and it takes time, which is something that poorly paid educators who are building their own playgrounds don't always have. And it was really important for us to try and create something that actually solved that problem for educators. So I want you to just look at these beautiful images. So Playground Ideas through the last 10 years has supported millions of children through thousands of grassroots organisations. But after a decade of doing bigger and bigger projects, some key challenges for us started to arise. One of the big principles for us is that as you scale, not everything that worked before works now. So these beautiful pictures are from a trial playground that we did in Timor-Leste, funded by a major global government program. The plan was to build 300 playgrounds across the country of Timor-Leste, one of the most exciting projects I've ever been part of. So millions of dollars were spent, and unfortunately, very little impact. Possibly no more than 3 playgrounds were ever built, and we just ran into problem after problem. Why was this unsuccessful? So what you're looking at, this beautiful playground, which is a prototype that we built. Bureaucratic issues that we couldn't get recycled car tires. The local timber was low quality. The materials across the country changed significantly, and we needed to build 300, and they wanted one single prototype. There was a lack of desire for playground infrastructure from the leaders, even though it was highly desired by the kindergarten and early childhood teachers that we were working with, and so on and so on. And so we really needed to create a solution that worked in this environment so the impact actually reached the children, which is important. So that brings me to Noodle Cart, which is something we're working on at the moment. So Noodle Cart solves a lot of these and many other issues when you're working in those extreme and complex environments at scale without sacrificing high quality, low cost, child-directed play, but in a sort of a format that is easy to use and educators will actually use and understand. So this is just a little process of where we came and went from. The top left-hand image is where we started with a few crates and a backpack full of bits and pieces. And you can sort of look through the progressions there of how we got to where we're going, with a focus on always using natural and non-toxic materials and trying to be as sustainable as possible. And then you'll see here when we started to finalize the design, you can see the first image was when we were working in Lebanon, which then went with our designer to the Belgium Children's Museum, and then to the Milan Design Show, and then to a final prototype where I live in Melbourne. So we tested this cart in a few different formats, everywhere from an asylum seeker centre in Amsterdam, a Greek refugee centre after the Syrian crisis when everyone was coming over by boat, and also a primary school in Lesotho, which is a tiny landlocked country. So I wanted to just quickly talk about Beirut, the trials, which is one of our major trials. So that's home to an estimated 1.5 million Syrian refugees. And the trial really highlighted the challenges facing those who've been forcibly displaced. They have small spaces or no spaces at all, limited access to local materials to actually build a playground, and a lack of priority on play from caregivers who are focused on their own survival, completely understandably. And we've made a documentary about this process, and this is an image from the film. But this play space, we were able to use basically a back alley. This was a back alley in an informal refugee settlement that we were able to instantly turn into a playground, to make a really special place for children who would sing and laugh when we entered the space. The next thing I wanted to talk about is that the next trial we did in Australia was with 12 completely middle-class Australian schools, so a world away from a refugee settlement in Lebanon. We worked with urban, rural and remote schools, and to our surprise, 10 of those schools wanted to buy the noodle cart, even though we weren't testing for an Australian audience at that time. But there was a strong part of me that I never wanted to create a tool that was for the poor, if it didn't work also for children all over the world. And this test really gave us the confidence to move towards production, and also was the thing that pushed us towards creating a social enterprise where wealthy Western schools could purchase noodle carts as well. So we didn't want to sacrifice that. So this is just a cubby house configuration of the noodle cart. So Noodle Cart was specifically designed to fill the lack of simple, scalable solutions for play. It creates an instant adaptable space with infinite configurations anywhere in the world. It can be flat packed and shipped, and it's been tested and designed with global scale in mind from the start. Noodle Cart deliberately was designed to remove cultural boundaries, as it doesn't look like anything. None of the pieces have any given meaning. They're not keyboards or old telephones or computer screens or tubes or pipes or, whatever. It has muted colors and themes, so a child can turn it into anything. It's not gendered in any way, and we've tested that to make sure that it's not dominated by any particular gender or seen as a boys or girls tool. And it's truly all inclusive because for the first child, children with any ability can construct a space that works for them, which is very difficult to do with a fixed playground, and they can work according to their needs. Another thing that we're really proud of is that environmentally, it's entirely made from natural and non-toxic materials, and it's shipped without any plastic packaging. We've checked the entire supply chain and assessed it for waste, and all of the plywood fits into exactly 4 sheets of plywood, and what's left over is a little skinny frame and a bit of sawdust. And socially, we're a 100% social enterprise, and all profits from Noodle Cart go towards supporting our work with Playground Ideas, which, by the way, probably would have closed during coronavirus had we not had Noodle Cart supporting us. These are all the pieces that come in the cart. It was really important for us that the Noodle Cart also had to work with educators. Sessions can be completely unpacked and managed by children once they get the hang of it. It's portable, it can fit through a standard door, It can move from room to room, and it's storable in a cupboard when packed up. It has rugged tires that can travel over unmade gravel roads and allow it to get from an early childhood centre, for instance, to a school in a refugee camp, or just from a classroom to classroom in a school. One thing I love is that it's storable out of the weather. A lot of these vulnerable communities work in extreme climates, and playgrounds get damaged and sun exposed very, very quickly in some of those environments. So having it be able to be kept inside is great. And also, if you live in a monsoonal environment, there are many months where it's difficult to play outside because it's raining all day, or particularly when children play in the middle of the day. And so you can move aside the desks in a classroom and create the playground inside, particularly in places where, like, say, Bangladesh, where you've got high rainfall and flooding all around you. It's easily maintainable, and children can pack up the cart themselves.
Dear Marcus, I'm sorry, but I have to ask you to maybe conclude, and then
Yeah,
we will have the
sure.
time to dive in. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm on the last slide, no problem. So these are some of the places where we've delivered carts already. And our key challenges going forward is we're now working in terms of scale, just to streamline and scale production, and finding the right partners to roll out for major projects around the world will help us lower the cost and get it to more children. The last slide is this: we want that, every child to have the same opportunity to thrive, no matter where they're born. Thank you.
Thank you too. This was very inspiring, and I can already see it, inviting it into my own context and trying it out. Your initiative really gets me this kind of seeds of inspiration, and what are the potential of such initiatives. So thank you very much for sharing and participating in the Real Play City Challenge. Thank you. And by having this inspiration, maybe we can now move to the next part. Maybe Hannah, you can share? Excellent. Thank you. So let's move to the Playful Placemaking Clinic. We call it clinic because we call for the collective intelligence of the group, but also the advisors that we have among us, like Sarah, who presented beforehand. But we also together have with us Jonathan Robinson from Civic. Jonathan is an entrepreneur, author, and anthropologist, co-founder of Impact Hub, and director of Civic. Jonathan has experience working in refugee camp settings in Jordan. And also with us, we have Selva Gurdogan from Superpool. She's an architect and partner at Superpool with experience in designing and delivering playscapes, taking into account perceived and actual risk and safety challenges with local government, caregivers, and children. So I would like to open up now the floor for the team of Noodle Cart to address maybe some first questions, or maybe thoughts that they might have towards our advisors at the moment, and then we can open up to the discussion to the whole group. I would also invite maybe questions in the chat, but you will also have the chance to address them for the next 15 minutes approximately. Thank you. So Marcus, maybe I don't know, Lorette, would you have anything that you would like, the insights from Jonathan, Sarah, and Selva when it comes to the
Sorry, you broke up a bit there.
Sorry.
I mean, I think the last slide was important to us. We're really looking at the key things for us are sort of how we scale up what we do, and also finding those partners that have the size where we can do large projects together. Because one of the key issues for us is that lowering the cost of the card is highly dependent on the amount that we make and the size of the project. So the right partnerships are really important. And also we've, talking to people like IKEA about flat packed shippable production and things like that are something that's the point that we're at now, is how we sort of do that stuff really well.
Marcus, I'll just ask a quick question, Jonathan, before. When you were talking, this looks very much also, it's a CNC cut panel system, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
With a lot of the work you guys are doing with the playground ideas, it's open source, and is there a kind of version of Noodlecart also that is downloadable and locally produced, or does it need to be ordered to receive?
Yeah, so no, I mean, first of all, it is CNC cut, but it's extremely complex. How it needs to be made and prepared, and the amount of time it takes to get that right, make it safe, is a huge process. So essentially what we've got is, it's a good question, is two models. One is anyone can build a playground using our open source Playground Ideas website from local materials. And then our social enterprise is Noodlecart, which is something that we've made flat packed and shippable. So I guess we're following that sort of IKEA model in that sense. But I mean, that's been a 2-year development to get the Noodlecart to a point where it meets the safety guidelines, because it's considered a toy in lots of places. The safety standards are incredibly strict. And so we don't really feel comfortable in sharing those files and doing that. But there's another thing underneath there, that Noodlecart operates like a business, but the profits go to support all of those communities to use that open source. So we've taken that model's worked quite well, and without that, we lost a lot of funding during coronavirus from our funders, and if we didn't have some income from Noodlecart, we would have really struggled. So that's kind of the decision we've made, that we can help essentially anyone. Grassroots organizations can build customized playgrounds, but Noodlecart is designed for those that don't have a lot of time to find all the materials and do that complex work, and are looking for a scaled up solution, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I'll let Jonathan speak.
So, Sava, you should keep going. I have just one quick question, which is about price and cost. Can you give us some indication of what the price per unit is for ordering one or 100?
So in Australian dollars, to order one, they're 6,650. We found that the total cost of building a customized playground that has sort of medium quality materials in the developing world is often, by the time we've got employees and stuff, is around $10,000. It is Australian dollars. So in US, you'll need to convert that to your own currency. So it sits at about half the price. And you know that it meets the safety standards. You know that it works with all those different environments. So that's the current price. But if people are purchasing more than one, the price changes fairly quickly. And for larger projects, it makes a big difference. Scale is really important in these complex things.
Marcus, Sarah here. Can I make a question in terms of maintenance and sustainability of this cart, in terms of thinking about vulnerable context? So who is going then, how are you looking at the kind of the network that is supporting the use of, or the organization that's supporting the use of this cart with children? So how are you looking at the kind of soft element? So have you also, the cart comes also with a package of training on facilitation, on maintenance, or a process to follow in terms of community engagement thinking? So how are you looking at that aspect in particular?
It's a really good question, and we've absolutely thought through that. So not only from the educator's point of view, where it needs to be simple and easy to pack up, but we've worked really carefully to make sure that to build the cart, first of all, you only need very, very simple tools. You only need 3 tools, and most of those tools are included in the box. And the cart comes with a pictorial, language-free construction, pack up, and teacher training manual in the box. You get the drill bits, you get the screwdriver bit, an Allen key, just like IKEA, in the box. So, but not only that, if you were to lose those things, I mean, I've worked in countries all over the world, from East Africa to Southeast Asia to South America, and all of the tools required you could find in any very, very basic local hardware store. the other thing about building out of timber is it's familiar. We didn't want to build out of plastic anyway, but with building with timber, if you had an issue where one of the screws became loose, you can look at that box and you can understand that how it needs to be fixed or glued. These are common known skills. So yeah, it was really important to us to make sure the cart was easily buildable, but also easily maintainable over time, and mendable and fixable. That was actually one of the key things that we had right from the start. And obviously, spare parts are available, and we can post, a small piece. The other cool thing about the Noodle Cart is we don't ever expect to replace an entire cart. We would only ever need to replace, a little piece, because the cart is made up of 236 pieces. And even in those big boxes, you can just take one piece off and replace that piece instead of needing to replace the whole cart. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's absolutely crucial.
And Sarah, further to your point on the training side, whilst we've got a supervisor manual that provides guidance with curriculum, the purpose of the cart at the end of the day is really to facilitate unstructured play, where the teacher or the adult really is just observing and doesn't need to interact. The cart and the children provide the learning themselves, and you see it evolve over time.
But my question is also, how do you make sure then the community use it in the right way? And then, I'm thinking about how do you identify like a place where the car can be stored during the night or during the day or and to make sure that it's not stolen, it's not broken, it's not vandalized, or that then maybe they don't ask children to pay to use it. So how do you make sure that there is a supporting community that will take care of it and will ensure that the car will be accessed to everyone? Because in particular in vulnerable contexts, you never know what can happen. So it's very important to have
that's a really good point.
The kind of soft element that allows the card is brilliant to work, to be accessible from everyone, and to be maintained the long term.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And the cart, in those kind of vulnerable contexts, we don't, first of all, those local communities, generally speaking, are not just purchasing a cart on their own. There's not people or teachers in a refugee camp that are purchasing the cart. In that kind of context, it will always be, say BRAC or Humanity and Inclusion or Plan or Save the Children. And we work with those staff, either in the country office or the global office, to roll out those programs to discuss those exact issues. And your point to, I think I mentioned in my presentation, the idea is that the cart is designed to be stored inside the classroom. And that's really important. Over the years, we've had I've worked on projects where I've woken up in the morning and gone to site, and all of the steel that we purchased to build the playground had been stolen, and we had to start completely from scratch. So your point is, Sarah, you clearly got experience in those environments where those kind of issues are real, they're ever present, and they need to be managed. And the ability to lock essentially the playground inside the school is a big issue, is a big win, because a brand new playground, often pieces will go missing. Even steel structures I've seen completely cut off at the ground and disappear, which then end up at the local metalworking shop where they cut them up and, I assume turn them into other things. So yeah, these are crucial issues. So it's designed to work in with those local organizations. It doesn't work without that. Having said that, there is I think training needs to go in place, but those early childhood educators have so few resources that they see this as a huge benefit, and they'll protect that thing with their life, because it's something so important to them. And particularly kindergartens get very few resources. So to give them something like this, I think would be seen as very valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Can I make another question? Sorry.
Sure. Sure.
As we are talking about how to scale it up, have you tried to develop like kind of business case? I'm sure you have, with like local artisans. I'm thinking, I don't know, in Kenya, for instance, there are so many Juakali, these great artisans, and to kind of sell the idea to them as a business to actually replicate this card and maybe adjust to the local features, the local capacity, so that to kind of create a training process where you work together with them to design a structure that works for them, and then they can use as a business for them. So you actually help creating like local livelihoods.
Yeah, it sounds great, but that's actually really hard. We are currently in discussions with a East African NGO, and we're looking at sort of a blended model where we do the CNC routing alone. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment for the machinery and the skills to make all of that happen. So there's finding a partner who can even do that and invest that kind of money is difficult to find. But we are looking at a blended model where potentially we ship the parts unsanded, unoiled, and sort of semi-prepared, where that local organization then prepares the timber, oils it, sands it, assembles the cart, and does training and delivery of that cart. So because the CNCing is a fairly expensive part of the process, and so doing it in the scaled up way that we do it for all of the carts, particularly because we're very low volume at the moment, is the most cost-effective way to do it. Otherwise, the cost for the organisations at the end tends to get very, very high and difficult to afford, basically. But so we've talked about blended models, and we're working on what we call the NK0, which is a much, much more scaled down, small version for 0 to 3 year old children, and that may have a different model because it's much smaller. But we're in the very early stages of that.
Marcus, this might feel a bit challenging, but it feels like there's a few quite major challenges ahead. One is the price point. The kind of, if I've got the maths right, it's about $5,000 US. That as a price point feels instinctively very prohibitive, given some of the contexts in which I've been trying to do kind of similar like things. And so isn't the challenge how to design something which is possible to fit into the direction of travel for the way hyperlocal manufacturing is going to go? So even IKEA recognizes that their model is broken. The future is, the wiki factory of the future. It's hyperlocal production. So isn't it your design that needs to flex to the reality of future production models and a price point which is affordable and scalable, rather than an expectation that you can ship these things around the world with carbon emissions and everything else? It feels a little bit like there's more work to do on the design to make it a really scalable, beautiful, brilliant thing.
That's it. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to take that on. I quite disagree. So as I said, we have our open source model where people can get car tires and low cost local materials, and they can take our pictorial step-by-step manuals, our safety manual, all of that stuff, and they can build a playground. What we find is actually, if you take the entire cost of that process, particularly when working with a global NGO who have executive level salaries and extensive planning processes, evaluation, all of that stuff, the cost is actually significant. And I've seen that over and over and over again, where thousands of dollars are spent on the organization structure before an impact hits the ground. And we've actually found that price seems prohibitive, but when you actually add up the total cost of a program, when you could just deliver 5 of these things and get a really high quality loose parts play space, it's actually very competitive. It's not, and in terms of carbon emissions, they're flat packed and they're quite small. So the shipping particularly on a ship, the carbon emissions are very, very low. And again, in terms of maintenance, those outdoor playgrounds are extremely high maintenance because often the materials you use are fairly low cost. You know, the piece of steel that you buy in East Africa is not the same as a piece of steel you might buy in the UK. The quality is low, they tend to rust quickly, and so you have high levels of ongoing maintenance. So I appreciate your question, but from someone coming from 12 years of experience of building those type of hyper-local playgrounds, there are lots of complexities there in terms of the long-term sustainability thing. And that's been something that plays on my mind about how much you spend up front and how much it costs to maintain over time. So I'm not completely denying that. I'm not saying that Noodle Cart solves all the problems for all the people. It doesn't. But the idea that hyper-local is the total solution for people and that they can, that they have because you're assuming huge amounts of time and energy for those local people. Whereas, you know, saying that IKEA's model is broken, I mean, they're a huge company, and the ability for me to go to a shop and simply purchase the exact thing that I need fulfills you know, convenience. It's low cost, it's very easy, and I can continue working on my job, which I enjoy, as opposed to building my own piece of furniture from scratch, which most of the world doesn't have the skill to do all the time. So there's no perfect solution in any of these things, and I think Noodle Cart fills a very important place. And finally, what I'd say is part of this Real Play City Challenge is about lowering the cost, and that comes with scale. Mm-hmm. And that's the key thing in the last slide, is that finding the right partners, working with people like IKEA, which we're already doing, to try and lower that cost and come up with those models, I think is really important. And if we can get to the point where we can do local production with a great partner, that would be fantastic. Good quality CNC machines, tooling and all that stuff is growing, and I hope that we could license the idea to local suppliers in the future. I'm not against that idea, but for me, it's all about, at the end of the day, impact for children. And a lot of those large NGO bureaucratic processes, if you look at the actual total budget and where the money goes, a lot of it goes into planning and a whole bunch of other things on the top, and no impact goes to the child. I want to be really clear about this. I've seen that over and over and over again. It's important to recognize that in total cost.
That's true, especially in vulnerable contexts. I mean, even in the Western, but also in other situations. Thank you very much for sharing this. We have like approximately 2 more minutes left for our discussion, but I wanted to go to the chat a little bit because there was a lot of interaction going on there, or requests for interaction with you, where we had some elements that relate also a lot to the placemaking aspect of your initiative, that has to do, for instance, how you customize, if you customize the design and approach to reflect the culture and community that you are addressing a Noodle Cart to. How do you ensure ownership, and if there is something specifically that you do with the local community to ensure the ownership, and if you have a kind of a follow-up after you implement your initiatives, your initiative of Noodle Cart in the local context.
So what was the first point again?
Yeah, sorry. I tried to
Let's do one of those at a time, yeah.
Yeah, if you customize Noodle Cart to reflect the local culture and community needs.
Yeah, so instead of doing that, so what we've done with those thousands of playgrounds with Playground Ideas is we always work. So I really appreciated Sarah's presentation about community consultation. So we have a free open source manual that specifically focuses on that type of community consultation. It's so important to gain that information from the community to design, if you're designing a fixed local playground. Noodle Cart solves that problem in a completely different way. And I think I said it in one of the first slides, by it being non-gendered and non-sort of culturally specific, what we see is that when children open the cart, they turn those pieces into culturally specific and culturally appropriate things for children who, for children with a disability or for any sort of ability. They create a space that works with their needs. They create a space that challenges where they are to where they're going. And so we've deliberately created something that is as generic as possible. So when they come with their own cultural view, their own eyes to that space, they use that cart in ways that are culturally appropriate. And we see children using the cart in different ways all around the world. So that's that. In terms of customization, it is the child that does the customization, not us. That was a very specific design decision.
That's very interesting and relates very much how design is important for placemaking, because sometimes we tend to neglect how much design can also play a role, even on the in the infrastructure itself.
I mean, what we found with Playground Ideas was, even though we offered all these interesting ideas, unfortunately, there is this virus of swing, slide, seesaw, sandpit. And we see thousands of playgrounds that all look like American playgrounds, poles, platforms, you know? So even though we offer all these hundreds of ideas and different ways, and we tell people, do a community count, what ends up happening is the community actually has seen this archetype and they want that archetype, right? Yeah, it's challenging. These are not easy problems to solve, because you're dealing with cultural understandings of what is high status and what should be done and what a playground looks like. Yeah, so there's lots of challenges in terms of customization. What was the next point?
It was about ownership, and I think maybe relates to what you have just said, that by the fact that the children, the user, takes it and appropriates it in a way that fits the cultural context and his or her own needs, actually somehow maybe guarantees the ownership as well. Or how have you experienced the ownership of?
So there's a beautiful image that I want to share. So when we were in Beirut, Lebanon, in an informal refugee settlement, so essentially just a very, very low socioeconomic part of town where refugees could afford to live. We arrived on the second day of testing that cart with an organisation called Right to Play, and the children were singing in this parade coming down to get the cart as we pulled it out of the car, and essentially just said, okay, you can stop pushing the cart now. We've got it. We've got this. And they took the cart and they pushed it to their school, singing, dancing the whole way, playing drums and all this stuff, and set up the space themselves, right? And I think often when we talk about ownership, we're talking about adult ownership. And when the children see that cart, they know that is for them. That it doesn't look like any adult thing they've ever seen before. It's too heavy and cumbersome to use as a market cart. It is for them, and they own it immediately. That's what we've seen. In terms of ownership for the educators, yeah, I think it's extremely important to work with that on the ground kindergarten teacher or primary school teacher and make it very clear that space is for them. And I think that the teachers love the Noodle Cart because when they open it, it gives them a little headspace, because the children are so engaged in the project. They're not dealing with discipline or other things, because often a lot of these schools are just doing rote learning a lot of the day. And all of a sudden they see children's lives light up and they see this engagement. And then they get to stand back and listen and absorb what it is the children are learning. So we encourage teachers to get a clipboard and actually start ticking off elements of the curriculum that they see children being competent in. As opposed to teaching, the children are doing self-directed learning and they're observing learning as opposed to driving learning. That was a bit off the topic, but do you get what I mean?
Oh, I lost you for the last second. If you can repeat your last sentence, Marco, sorry.
I was just saying that children, the teachers, the educators get to observe learning as opposed to drive the learning.
Yeah.
And I think your last point was about follow-up. So yeah, I mean, we're still very early days. So we've only just done our first production run and carts are still going out. But yes, certainly we have a Facebook group where we try and get all of the owners into that group where they can share ideas and photos of what they're doing and how they're running their curriculum. So that conversation is still very early on. I wouldn't say that we're geniuses at that part yet. And that's mainly because we're still learning from our users and but yes, absolutely. We want to have an ongoing conversation where we supply them with resources and and things like that.
Lovely. Thank you very much for reflecting and responding to all of our questions. If you check the chat box, you will see that you have lots of supportive messages from all around the world about your initiative. And I can already feel the warmth of the network being developed within our initiative here as a group. So thank you very much all for being here. Hannah, maybe you could share our summing up. So maybe I can share a little bit about what's next. There is one more webinar to join this month. The next one will be on the 30th of November, and it's about child safeguarding, and we will do it together with UNICEF. So feel free to invite your friends, and of course that you join as well. I think it's going to be like a very interesting conclusion of all the sessions that we have had before as we are building up on our knowledge when it comes to playful cities and how to integrate it with placemaking approaches. You can find out more about the inspiring winners of the challenge at realplaycitychallenge.org. And if you want to get involved and claim places to play in your city, you can invite the placemaker to deliver initiatives where you are. So this is your opportunity now to connect and invite. You can also join the Real Play City Challenge LinkedIn group. This is where we gather and share to connect with other placemakers. Or you can become a partner of the Real Play City Challenge to support building the momentum, because this is a very critical moment for what we're doing and the network to grow and really have impact. And of course, to follow up for the next edition of the challenge. And if you have any questions, suggestions, feel free to email us at info@realplaycitychallenge.org. Thank you very much. I would like to invite the placemakers who participate in the next session as well, that has to do with the interactive part of building up the proposal, the scalability proposal, to stay with us. We will have 5 minutes break. For the rest of you, I would like to say an enjoyable rest of the evening, day, rest of the afternoon, wherever you are at. And thank you very much for joining, and see you in the next one. Thank you.